Mikoto Misaka's powers and the weirdness of Academy City. Academy City sets us up in a world where if you're an Esper, you're a scientifically empowered superhuman. If you're not an Esper, you're a magically empowered superhuman. There's basically no difference. It's just that the rules are mildly changed in the magical world, but they're basically the same exact thing, but called different things. Where Railgun has people making tests and tests and tests and stuff, the magical index world basically just has phenomena, stories, and things. It's really, really weird. I mean, why did no one bring it up in either series? No one brings it up. It's something that really, really, really should be brought up, but it's not. It's like in Supernatural when Dean throws away that locket that supposedly can find God in the trash, and for the entire 11 season run of Supernatural, it doesn't get a purpose. Just like his daughter. Now I'm talking about Supernatural. I'm sorry. Okay, so Mikoto Misaka's superpowers. Misaka's powers are apparently somehow electric, and the thing that might bother someone in high school looking at what she's doing is that she doesn't just not get any recoil from what she does. She doesn't have a foundation. She doesn't have a place to anchor her abilities to for her powers to shoot a coin forward. You would at least think that if you've seen the season 1 ending. Spoiler alert. 3, 2, 1. Okay, so at the end of season 1, Mikoto and her pervy lesbian best friend teleport up into space. I'm thinking it's something like low Earth orbit, thereabouts, and she uses her powers on a not giant but a pretty big robot, like Code Geass big. Not as big as something like a Gundam, but Code Geass big, thereabouts. And she fires it at a giant satellite space station thing. And she basically gets a tiny little bit of recoil. Enough so that she can fall in her best friend's arms and they can teleport back to the planet. You might think that's very annoying because where would she anchor her powers? What would she anchor her powers to in space, especially in a very, very, very soft atmosphere? But actually, if you think about how she might be producing those electrons that power her railgun ability, it makes total perfect sense. In order to produce this amount of energy out of seemingly nowhere, she would need to affect matter on a subparticle level. Molecules are particles that are mixtures of atoms linked together. Atoms are protons, electrons, and neutrons. Ions are when atoms have extra electrons and whatever. But there's a smaller scale to that. There's these things called subparticles. Everything that you talk about below an atomic scale usually gets the designation of subparticle. Now, the smallest we can at present calculate in terms of size of things is something called a Planck length. That's negative 10 to the power 40 or something. Very, very, very incredibly immensely small. And I would expect that once we surpass quantum computing and reach a higher level of computing, we might someday go below that blank level. But it is possible to affect subparticles in a way where they could simulate actual particles. If you excite a subparticle with enough energy, it could simulate a particle. It's all about interacting with the vibrations of particles around it. Now, a subparticle would be pure kinetic energy if it was mostly kinetic energy if it was excited in that way. It would be purely releasing kinetic energy. This could be possible because we know that atoms can release something called the strong force within them, and when atoms release their strong force, we get a nuclear explosion. Now, a nuclear explosion, you might think that the stuff inside the atomic force is just released and turns into a wave, but actually, nuclear explosions really are actually the air around the nuclear bomb setting off, burning up. When you get a fission reaction, so on, you essentially, there's a release of high energy gamma radiation, of high energy gamma rays, and those high energy gamma rays cause the air around them to set on fire. So if she's affecting subparticles, she could be creating synthetic electrons, pushing the thing up into space. It makes total sense. She wouldn't need an anchor because even at a very low level of atmosphere, she would have all the subparticles she would need. Another thing that might bug you there is, why didn't they freeze in space? Well, actually, space, you don't actually freeze in space.